All right, welcome to Life's Not Linear. This is Nahom Fissaha. Nahom, if you could please give us a little background and tell us about yourself.
Yeah. Hey, what's up, guys? My name is Nahom Fissaha. Where I'm at right now is located in Denver, Colorado, and my Airbnb is as I'm in between places. Um, and so another point, I guess, what I do is I'm a like IT or cloud consultant at Microsoft, helping enterprises take advantage of cloud resources. What I do for fun is usually be outdoors, especially during like a pandemic or shutdown. I feel like, we're all locked in, so it's nice to just be outside where there are no walls, but still you're able to maintain your distance. And where I started, originally my family is from Ethiopia. I was born there, moved, my family and I, two sisters, moved to the States around 2000 when I was like 5 or 6. Grew up in the Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C. area. Did high school, did all grade school through there, and went to James Madison University, about 2 hours southwest, where I studied engineering. And that's kind of like a high level overview.
Awesome. And then could you tell me a little bit about your move from Ethiopia to here and how that transition went?
Yeah. So originally, like one of the main reasons that my family moved out here to the States was my dad was just like politically involved in just doing things like peaceful protests, like, handing out flyers. The kind of state of the government wasn't the best during kind of his I'd say teen and early 20s. Um, so it was a big pivot for him from going from he was in line to be a deacon at a church to going to like Western or modern university, getting an education and then realizing like, hey, actually this government isn't so nice. Let me just hand out flyers. But then government was so bad that his life was in danger. At one point, I've read some of his things that he's written, and he was sent to like a kind of like torture camp. Um, but he was fortunately enough to make it out, and he's like, I think out of 57 or 63, he's like he's like one of 17 that made it out alive. So his life was in danger, and he applied for political asylum, was accepted. He came first, and then once he got here, my mom, myself, and sisters came out here to Northern Virginia. That's where we kind of set up shop, and coming. I give my parents all the prop in the world, because the main reason they came out is like they had kids and they wanted to give their kids kind of like a better, safer shot at life, get an education, and for them to give up like their culture, including like knowing the language. It's not like they're both fluent in English when they moved here, and they're still working on it. So giving that up, giving their family and friends, and all of a sudden just like legitimately like showing up to this, like hopping off the plane and showing up in the States here with just 3 kids and each other. And we had some family members in the area, but it's a tough road already when they got here. And I give them all the props for grinding like crazy to be able to put myself and two sisters through grade school, and always emphasizing like stay in school, even though they probably were much more patient with me than I deserved. Uh, definitely wasn't the easiest child. That now I apologize to my mom for a lot for. But yeah, I would always emphasize just like going to school and stuff. And at the time, I might have not like gotten the idea of why, but now I definitely appreciate it. And yeah, that was always kind of like the main emphasis or goal in our house growing up was, how are you doing in school? You doing well? But then there's also pros and cons to just focusing on just like grades. But I even like took it upon myself to do, actually did a lot of like art starting middle school, and always had to keep it up on my own, like usually buying my own supplies just to paint. I remember like wanting to take art classes really just so I could like get free supplies and do my own thing. Um, but yeah, I would say that's like some of the things that I remember from about growing up, my childhood, kind of the transition.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It definitely is. I think we talk about immigrants coming to America and children of immigrants, but I think it's super important to highlight how big of a leap that is. Both my parents also immigrated here, and it's just like I feel like sometimes I take it for granted. I like forget, and then I'm like, oh shit, they came here and didn't know anybody. I don't even know how they got here. Like, how
Yeah.
how did you make it this far? You know? Um,
Yep.
so it's like scary for maybe like me to go from high school to college, but how do they go from one country to another? Like, it's pretty epic. It's pretty cool. So thank you.
And it makes me think like, if they can do that, then like I know the language, I'm familiar with the culture. Like
Mhm.
it's kind of hard for me to like one, I guess like, you know, complain or just try to do it or try it hard, like try to make it work, whatever I'm trying to strive for, because I feel like I already have like almost like an edge by just knowing the language, compared to what they had to kind of go through. So yeah, no, I definitely kind of that definitely resonates with me, and I believe in like how much of a leap it was, because I'm like, if I could jump half that much in my life, then I'll be like pretty good.
So going from there, we briefly chatted about your like high school experience before we were recording. Do you mind chatting more about that and your experience kind of growing up here?
Yeah, so growing up in like the Northern Virginia area, I was fortunate enough to, once we moved around a bit, we like settled into Springfield, Virginia, and the like high school that I was designated to go to was in walking distance, and I did like middle school in the area too, but the middle school and high school was super diverse. I'm talking about like really no real majority. And funny enough, it was actually called Robert E. Lee High School, but up until about a month ago, it actually got changed. Its name changed to John Lewis High School, which is cool. Um, yeah, right. And I'm actually they're actually offering to do updated diplomas. So like if because I graduated before the change, they'll actually like you could submit your name to get like a new diploma. I was like definitely doing that.
Yeah.
But it's funny because like we were the most like probably one of I'd say there's no you could walk down the hallway or even if you walk down the cafeteria and people if all of a sudden if somehow everyone brought like lunch from home, it would smell like you just wouldn't know like all the flavors of the rainbow.
Yeah.
So like visiting like my friends homes growing up was amazing because especially around dinner time because I'm like yeah, I'm about to chow down on some stuff. You can go from like Indian food to Spanish, or you can go to like even the neighboring country of Ethiopia, of Eritrea. And like I had like a best friend growing up who was from there, and it's like similar food, but different language, and you get to kind of like parents always like love talking about the country or just like helping or sharing like what their life is like. So I feel like I got a chance to not growing up, we didn't get much to travel around it much, but by just having such a diverse amount of like people around me, got little glimpses in. And I think that's what like spurred or in like made me want to just like explore on my own a lot more because I'm like, wow, there's some cool people in my neighborhood. Like, what else is out there? I want to see these places people are talking about.
That's awesome. I love that you were. I feel like food is just like so powerful. I mean, there's like negative connotations, but also it's not just like a yummy meal. It's like there's a whole story behind, somebody's favorite meal, how this is made, where it's from, and it just like spurs a lot of conversations. So that's cool that you're able to like experience that within your hometown.
Yeah, no, I was very fortunate because shortly after, like, and it was I got to have that experience, which was super rich. And then when I went to James Madison University, which is um, like not as diverse in regards to like ethnicity and race, I got a chance to kind of like be pushed out of my like comfort zone and experience something that like when I was in high school, I thought me all I knew was my high school, so I'm like, well, I guess this is like how all high schools in the U.S. are at, but I got a chance to come into a university, meet a lot of different people who had much different like or high school experiences, and that kind of just like expanded my like kind of idea like the spectrum of like experiences that people have, regardless of like where they're coming from. Because even though JMU like tends to be like mainly like East Coaster, like high schoolers or students from the East Coast, still got a blend from everywhere. and even just going from like different counties. Like I met students that went to like high schools that would be on my like district, like for sports or whatever, and their high school experience was totally different than mine. So kind of feel like I've always gone by sheer dumb luck, maybe just like the opportunity to be like exposed to a different side or a new experience or perspective that like maybe the previous year or two that I just didn't have the opportunity to do.
That's it's interesting. It's great that you were able to kind of go to middle school and high school with a lot of diversity. I feel like there's two ways, like you either grow up around diversity, so to you it's like no question, or you grow up around a lot of people that don't look like you and you're like seeking more like diversity. And so that shift kind of happened for you when you went to college. Um, how were you able to kind of like react to that? And I don't know, how was that experience?
Yeah, I mean, like it was definitely a kind of like new experience for me, to go from like a high school where, if a teacher is all of a sudden taking roll call and you hear like, my name like Nahom, you'll hear like another person's name like, you have a Mark Reyes, Nao Tekeste. Of course, you'll have like a Will Smith or Mickey Stebiak, but then you have like a Thomas Watson, Damond Richardson, Sharug Sahib, Jungbin Cho, Tai Dang, Melissa Simonavon, like, it's just like full spectrum of like of names. And then my university experience where it was like, I'm not saying it was like every time, but like
Yeah.
a majority of the like names are more like American. So it'd be like Connor, Grant, Ethan, Cameron, Greg, and then like Nahom. Like, what the heck is a Nahom? They never said that, but it was just like a different thing. And then yeah, no one. I mean, in high school growing up, no one cared or thought much of like where everybody was from, because everyone's like, hey, we're all from somewhere else. But then in like while at JMU, when people I got more of the kind of, oh, where are you from? Oh, like that's cool. Like never met somebody from Ethiopia, or like maybe someone did, and it's like that was like the one Ethiopian that they knew. So it's definitely like made me feel like I stuck out more, but it always felt like I was trying to like, maybe it was just like growing up, just trying to make the best of situations where I was just like, okay, this is just like back again, like a new experience that I get to kind of like, add into like my life or change the flavor of. Because, if I just maintained in my bubble of like that, like kind of environment of just like the diversity, I wouldn't know what the rest of other experiences could potentially be. Um, but it was definitely, like I said, if you're being pushed out of your comfort zone, it doesn't feel like comfortable the whole time. There's some part of it that's what they call it, like out of your comfort zone, because you're uncomfortable being pushed out of your norm. That was like a bit of an adjustment. All of a sudden not having the diverse amount of food, or like the opportunity, I guess, to ask about different cultures. It was just like a different focus of like conversations, or I guess, yeah, not as many kind of culture-based conversations that would happen. Because I would ask, like, if I'm like going to a friend's house growing up, that's how I learned, like, oh, do I need to take my shoes off? Like the little nuances and stuff like that.
And some people are
But
like
yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. And growing up, like my parents, they've spent most of the time in Ethiopia. I I'm like, at home, it's like an Ethiopian for the most part, like culture. But when I was like, my sister and I, since we were all so close, the majority of our time would be at school or outside of the home. So, we're in like American culture. So there's a lot of like clashing of cultures growing up inside the house, which also led to some like fireworks going off. Cause it was just like, different cultures have different kind of like values and like norms. So when you have like my parents who are like, deeply ingrained and I've grown up in like one culture, they're the most part, even though they're in America, they're still like there are some deep rooted like values and kind of like ways of doing things. And I'm over here like a smoothie blender filled with just like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. There are definitely some like opportunities for fireworks to occur between us growing up. But not just me, including my sisters. I'm not going to just throw myself under the bus. I'll take my sisters down with me. Um,
Yeah.
but I feel like that allowed me seeing like how my parents expected or value certain things or had certain cultural like norms that, and then I would go outside of my like home and be in school and like there were other cultural norms that kind of like created this like lens or delta that I felt like I just like gave me a chance to notice that, oh, like something that my parents feel like they accept automatically because it's so like deeply ingrained, or someone from like who's been like deep in American culture accepts so much. I see the difference in doing them. And so that kind of like bubbles up to the surface of like, oh, so it's a choice to view things like that based off like where you're from and like what you decide to like accept. So I always feel like I like maybe that's why I always ended up asking why or questioning things and like feeling like everything is like a variable that like if I could figure out a way to like change or like you know maybe like tweak a little bit, I could like get different results.
I love that example of the smoothie blender, and I'm glad you brought up like the clashing cultures at home. Um, that's definitely something that, as of recently, I've been thinking more about because, like, I don't know, when I was a kid or even when I was in high school, I was just kind of like, yeah, why are my parents different? But I didn't really put much thought into it. Like past that, I was just like, yeah, my parents aren't like Sam's parents.
Yeah.
And I didn't. Now I feel bad. I'm like, I didn't mean to make you guys feel bad. I just didn't understand.
Yeah.
So it's I'd love to talk more about that because I think whether it's like in regard to identity or just the little nuances like shoes off or how I think what I've noticed is and a lot of like Middle Eastern or South Asian cultures, there's a whole different type of like respect for your elders or just like
Mm-hmm.
a different tier and how you brought up like men, women, this, that. And so
Mm-hmm.
um how were you able to kind of like when your blender was getting full and you were like culturally clashing and the fireworks happened, how were you able to like navigate those fireworks within your family and yourself?
Gotcha. So within there's definitely like the friction between what my parents had grown up on versus what I'm being like thrown in and mixed in with, and like the deltas causing some friction. And some things that like I like felt like I accepted is realizing that yes, my parents are going to want the um very best for me, fortunately, and like that's what they're like gearing up for, right? But for example is my parents were super into like you gotta go to school, and they were not supportive of like sports at all. They're like,
So
yeah, right, and they're like, that's just like if you're doing sports, that means you're not reading,
oh
and
my
if you're not reading, like what I'm saying, it's like, and they're like, we came to this country for you to get an education. I'm like, all right, and that would usually start some fireworks and some arguments, but I like took it upon myself to just if I wanted to do sports, and I could tell like it wasn't anything unhealthy or dangerous. Because everybody else is doing it, and it's like supported in communities and like in the high schools. Um, I I would walk myself to practice, and eventually, after doing that for a couple of years, then my parents started to see. They still say like you're still playing sports, stuff like that. But then they started to see like the positive impacts that it was having on me, and I started to kind of like sway them. By the end of like my like senior year of high school, I remember like my mom and dad saying like, "Oh yeah, high school sports was good for you," and like my mom was saying like, "Yeah, you were right. Like we should have like supported you more in doing it. Like you got a lot of just like good life lessons and like relationships out of it." So getting to the point of my mom, especially my mom saying, "Hey, we should have supported you doing sports more." it's not like they didn't want me to like have the positive impacts. They just like thought like by saying yes to only like learning and through like classical like books and stuff, that was the like best way for me to be successful. But once I realized like, hey, me like taking charge of the wheel a bit,
Trying new things.
could I try new things, and like you know if it truly resonates with me, like the things that I value, and I know I'm going to get some like long term like as long as I'm committed to it and consistent to it and consistent at pursuing it, I'll get some positive things back out of it. Then I'll stick to those things. So that was the like formation of like in high school of like values related to like my actions and like dedications and like commitment to those actions consistently that lead to like better kind of defined values, and like learning about myself that help me kind of like navigate decisions. Because there's going to be like, if you think about like playing sports or not playing sports, it's not like a bad or like good, it's like it's not black or white.
Mm-hmm.
But you're like in making those type of decisions, especially as they get like even more complex going up, there aren't always the black and white answers that you can like say like, oh, you know what, I'm not going to go, if you're in a fork in the road, I'm not going to go down that way, that's dangerous. It's just like that you have options. And sometimes it's hard to see like what those kind of options and choices kind of like compound to. But having kind of like putting the time and effort to like actually think about, formulate your values are what allow you to kind of have a compass in those moments where you can go in any direction. Because then imagine if you're just like floating in the ocean, and you can technically go in any direction. You got 360 degrees to swim towards. But if you're, and one way is like going to play sports, one is like doing, I don't know, like just hanging out at the park, going to some like science like club meetup, building stuff. But like what my values are allow me to say like wholeheartedly, I don't want to go in going to the science like fair route, or like going to build stuff route. And I love to do both of those things. Those are just examples. But it allows me to, one, just not even think about those, because they're not based off my values. They're not even like almost like don't come off as an option. Yeah. And then the direction that I do want to go, I'm able to like full-heartedly commit to it because I know it's for me. Like I haven't compromised my values, and I know how they fit in to kind of like who I am and like as a person. That like even if they do go wrong, then it's like, well, I at least took like the driver's seat of my own life. So I'll have the opportunity to like own the entire like decision and outcome process. But as well as like, hey, even if it goes wrong, at least it didn't go wrong because I let somebody else make the decision for me. So there's definitely some like soul searching, I'm not gonna lie. Happens in the first like few years of college, but it's all good because you get to, if you're fortunate enough to have that much time outside of your home, you get to all of a sudden be in, not in the real world, but like be able to develop your own community in your own world where you get to explore those values by just like I recommend like having as many different experiences as possible that like push you. You don't have to like overdo it, but I just try to like maintain like a little balance between wanting to be comfortable so you could like, you're like able to like actually work at a kind of productive level. And it doesn't have, and by work I don't mean like schoolwork, but like in a way that you could actually have like an impact. So you're not always having to like be learning how to do something, or being kind of like ramped up on, but in a way that's like you're pursuing some new skill, effort, experience, through like inside the like classroom, outside of the classroom for sure, in a community that exposes you to new people and like new ideas and kind of just like new perspectives along the way, that like you all of a sudden think like, where you have like a aha moment of like, oh, I didn't think about it that way. And then you just kind of like prototype your life forward.
Yeah. That's great that you were able to kind of have this more soul searching, introspective view. I feel like at such a young age, or like start it, I think it's like a forever process. So
Oh yeah.
It's just great because I think that there are a lot of people that move throughout life and they don't like look inwards or think intrinsically. Um, so it's really cool that you have kind of been able to do that as you've gone along. Um, and then you mentioned briefly as well earlier about you were kind of traveling the last year and a half.
Yeah.
Do you mind talking to that as well and kind of like what were you doing? What was the purpose? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So as I said before, my parents gave up a lot of things for us to move to the States. And I think that naturally just like implanted the travel bug within me. Um, and if they, all of a sudden can just like drop into the Washington D.C. area, which I admit they have like a lot of like family members and friends already there that help them kind of, stimulate to the States. I just wanted to see like what else is out there. So when I was finishing up at JMU, and even had to do like a fifth year, I had the opportunity to, have a couple of job options. Majority of them were in the Northern Virginia area, so near home, going to an office. But fortunately, I got this job offer, which was working at a great company. But the nature, I got offered two positions. Both of them required a ton of travel, and I was down to travel. Loved it. And I was already going to have to relocate to Dallas, Texas for initial training. But I was fortunate enough to have someone in my engineering leadership program who got the same job almost the year before me, and I called her up and said like, "Yo,
What's the
you
deal?
got to help me out. What's the deal? Like what do I need to know? Not just from a job perspective, but like kind of just like how has this job impacted your life, good ways, bad ways." And one of the things that she told me was after around the first 6 months, you don't have to live in Dallas. Like that's just for initial training. You could like go back home. And that's what a lot of people from like our kind of university hiring program usually end up doing for our role is, they move to the initial city. I'll usually have signed like a year lease. Usually a fun time because it's like 100+ university hires all from across the like North America who get plopped down into a city. And it's almost like that freshman year, like, yeah, we're all new here. What's up? Let's have some fun. But because she told me that you don't have to be there, you really can move after 6 months. I intentionally signed a 9-month lease because I was like, oh, like I don't want to like commit myself to like a year or more. So realized that after 6 months of training that like, okay, I've gotten the hang of like my job, and like I was already starting to travel almost like every other week to Philadelphia and California. And then I started to think to myself, like, man, I'm traveling every other week. I feel like I'm paying for like a luxurious storage unit for my apartment because I still had like 3 months on my lease. So when I started feeling that, because I was already spending like every other week in a hotel, I was already in between weeks visiting friends and family, and spending like I mean, at one point I think I was gone from like my apartment for like a month because I was just out and about. It kind of like that experience kind of eased me into the idea of just almost like being like a nomad. And when my lease like was coming to an end, I realized like I was talking to a buddy of mine, Sean, who I met through work, and he was saying like, oh, it would be cool to live like, room with each other, potentially get like a super small place since we travel so much, and just have a place that we, when we were in Dallas, we could crash. And I was like, put all my stuff in a storage unit because he signed a 1-year lease. He had 3 months left. And he was already traveling a ton too. So we were like, he had like a pretty sweet 1-bedroom apartment in the heart of Dallas. And let's say if in a given like 6 weeks, we might overlap 1 week or two where we were both at the apartment. But that kind of got me geared towards like what living out of like a suitcase, not just for work, but for like my personal life was like. And I managed to convince him when his lease ended. I was like, dude, we definitely should not sign a lease. We should, like, what do you think about going to different cities and Airbnb being like, in different places that we wanted to live? Because I mean, Dallas was awesome. It was cool, but it just did like, it wasn't like a city for me. And I was already getting a chance to like taste and experience different cities through work and visiting friends. I was like a couch bum to my friends because I was just like, yo, I'll show up if you say come visit.
Yeah.
Like, I will. But so that kind of like that was the start of that first 3 months while waiting for his lease. I would, if he was, especially if I knew if he was going to be in a week, I'll go visit some friends. And then and he was like, yeah, dude, let's do it. He put his stuff in a storage unit and sold some of it. We did a couple months in Austin. So that took us to about like the fall of 2019. And then the fall of 2019, our plan was like, oh, let's do like, both want to check out Denver and see what, having all of these like awesome kind of outdoor recreational activities just like at the tips of your fingertips are like. We ended up doing the winter season here, snowboarding and skiing all season. That's all we like cared about. And then next like kind of plan or idea or move was going to be San Diego for about 2 months. Mm-hmm. But that was about this year. So we finished up, we were in Denver, November to March. And around like early March, he was like, dude, because he had the plan after San Diego, like after around 6 weeks to 2 months, he already knew where he wanted to live. He's always wanted to live in Boston. That's where he is now. But he said, dude, I don't know, like, it's like the pandemic or like COVID-19 was really kind of like picking up. But the shutdowns hadn't occurred. He's like, dude, I don't know if I like want to go. I was like, dude, 100%. Like we can cancel our Airbnb. Like I'll still go and do my own thing. Like I'm not going to hold you like hostage while there's like this like crazy health crisis that was gearing up. But the shutdowns hadn't occurred. And I remember like they were starting to happen around like early March. And I had like checked out of our Airbnb, have my car packed, like ready to go on this road trip from Denver to San Diego, hitting some national parks. And then I just kind of like try to like read up on as much of the news as possible and kind of like the development. And like I think I was going to leave that weekend, like the first weekend of March before the shutdowns really started to hit. I think the shutdowns hit the following week, but I like car packed. I was like, I think I got to call it and cancel the trip. Like I'd rather be in a city that I'm familiar with than rather than going to like a brand new city that like, if they do shut down, then I like know no one and there isn't much to do to like meet other people or just like, enjoy because I know nothing about it. And it won't be like San Diego at its like truest form. So I had to make the tough call and be like, no, I'm not going to go. Ended up crashing I met one of my like new roommates who I'll be moving with at the end of this month. I was like, dude, I canceled this trip. I got to figure out a game plan. Can I crash at your place? And he said, yeah, dude, we have like a spare bedroom. You can just crash there. And I was like, sweet. So that allowed me, I knew I was going to stay in Colorado. That gave me some time to like find an Airbnb, committed to that from March to about a couple weeks ago, and got a chance to experience like what living solo was like. I hadn't painted since I was traveling so much, I hadn't painted in like a year and a half. So I remember like the shutdowns occurred right after I decided to like cancel the trip. So I was like, all right, good call. Yeah. And California was one of those big shutdowns too. I was like, oh, thank God. I remember like going out once I finally got an Airbnb like a week or two later, going out and like buying like 4 or 5 like massive canvases so that like things are gonna be close. So I might as well just like dive back into art for me to get back into painting, and did that since March. So like, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. And that was my first time living solo. Like I've always, had roommates, or didn't really have roommates and I was just bumming on people's couches or spare bedrooms. So that was a cool experience, getting to kind of like, all this time I was just like bouncing around everywhere, and all of a sudden I get to kind of just like relax, be in one spot and like dive into things like art, but also just like also gave me time to like think about it's kind of like that, and that even in college when you have those experiences and you're bouncing around so much, and you got to give yourself time to like think about those experiences and reflect on them. So I felt like that's what that kind of like downtime of the pandemic gave me, and got a chance to work on some like volunteer virtual projects. One of them was with UIF, and helping Humira and Letitia and the D School putting on some events. But yeah, and then now ended up like in the middle of all that, and like reading up on like what the development of the pandemic or COVID-19, there not being probably a cure for, I'm assuming, this is my own personal opinion, probably until like sometime next year, I decided to, my like buddy Trent said, like, the guy who would let me crash at his place, he's like, yeah, man, like, I know you're going to go to San Diego, but we're going to, like, him and his buddies, we're going to start looking for a new place to live closer to the city. And if you're still around, like, do you want in? And I was like, let me think about it. Did a bit more soul searching. I was like, yeah, Denver's, for me at least right now, like the place to be.
Be happy, like, you know, you can live there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like even if I was to just look at it, because we only signed like a 1-year lease, from the scope of like a majority of that time, it being in kind of like the pandemic mode, you know, like I'm pretty sure, I feel comfortable saying like odds of us having like a vaccine by like spring or pretty slim. So, like, we're moving in a couple of weeks. A majority of that time of the next 12 months following are going to be in this kind of like shutdown or kind of health crisis like mode. And I think being in a place like Denver where, you know, I can go on hikes, still being like distant from people, a lot of like activities that are still open that I could like kind of enjoy and allow me to, you know, step it back from the computer, because now I'm always on the computer working. Kind of relax, allows me to recharge and get back into work. Is what I was thinking. Yeah, and a lot of the other cities I was considering, like, I love Austin, Texas, but like some of the things that I loved about Austin, Texas are not happening anymore. Like, I was supposed to go to South by Southwest earlier this year, and I was going to I always go to like Austin City Limits, like a music festival, but not happening. So I'm like, damn. But I just had to kind of judge the places I was considering with like different criteria, or you know, them not at their fullest. Denver seemed like the solid choice, at least for the next 12 months. And who knows, I'm thinking maybe it might be a little bit longer, but I have 12 months to kind of play around with.
Nice. I love that through all these experiences, you kind of bring it back to, you know, your introspective soul searching, and before you make a decision, you come back to that. I love that you like check in with yourself and like give yourself time to do that. And so, kind of leading into my last question is, through all the things that you've experienced and that you've done, what is a piece of advice that you would want to give to like students today?
I would say, there's so many experiences.
Yeah.
It's funny too, because I have one of my close cousins. She's actually just went back for her sophomore year at VCU, and because her uncle has been super supportive of me growing up, I always try to like reach out and check in every month. And I actually just talked to her a couple weeks ago, actually. So I feel like I'm just like, when you ask that question, I'm almost like thinking about her and talking to her. And one of the advices that I think I appreciated that she, you know, I was talking to her a lot and trying to like help her just figure out the methods of the madness when she was like going into freshman year, and while she was in freshman year, is think about how just to have like a diverse experience. So if you're going into like college, you're obviously going to have to take your classes, and you could, you know, diversifying those means like taking classes outside of just like your major, like your minor, like, you know, push yourself to take something that you could like almost like use to prototype forward. And you could almost say like, okay, so you're diversifying your like classes that you take. So that means like if you have to take 4, maybe like nine classes in a given like 2 semesters, throw in one class that's kind of like this is like the blueberry. This is like the blueberry in the cherry pie, you know, like you never know what you're going to get. It might be a dank bite, but sometimes you'll just like learn something new that you can also not just like say like, oh, that's not for me, because then that goes back to like knowing what direction you want to go. But maybe all of a sudden you're like, oh, this blueberry is dank. I want to go in this direction.
Yeah.
And even if you don't, there is, as you like diversify the things that you kind of like, you know, learn about and throw into your head, as you kind of you're able to kind of like make the connection between, you know, a complex systems theory class and like environmental science, or like youth culture class, like literature class, and like back to even just like complex systems theory. It kind of gives you how I experience it is like kind of gives you like a better like way of just like seeing the world. It helps you kind of understand it a bit more. But even outside of the classroom, like if you're into like sport clubs, do that, do one of those. But how about like checking out like a community service organization, or if you're into like if you're in like a fraternity or sorority, like what about checking out a like an art association or something like that, that like, you know, and you're not an art major, but like, you know, say you're a business major, you're in a sorority and fraternity, and you're in like an art society, or you're in a community organization. But yeah, so I'd say diversify your like kind of like actual classes, the kind of like social outside of the classroom organizations that you join, so that you're in like different circles and you're exposed to different people. And then your of course I'm forgetting it after I just said it. Classes, clubs. And I guess the last one would be is those are all like structured things. But this helped me out a lot in colleges. Like pick something new that you want to do and learn, totally new. You can like be like a beginner at it, like you're starting at zero, and it's something that you're already interested in. Like come up with a list of like five things, and for that month, pick one of those things and dedicate just in a given span 20 hours. So like I said, if you want to learn how to play like guitar, for example, try to dedicate 20 hours roughly in about a month, where you're just like, I'm talking about like high quality hours. So like no like extra, you try to make, by making high quality, you know, you could sign up for online classes, YouTube videos, but then there's also like finding somebody who's also really good at teaching guitar, and like, you know, the quality of like the actual learning goes up like huge, right? But it's like a range. So whatever within your means and your like surroundings, be resourceful to try to find like the highest quality that you can receive. Dedicate 20 high quality hours. So I mean, like even if you're going down the like YouTube route, like turn off your cell phone. Like I'm talking about like no Warzone, no Fortnite, no cell notifications, just one solid, at minimum like 1 hour chunks of you just like dedicating to learning that. And just doing that, and even if you like, you know, you dedicate those 20 hours, two things will occur. One, you'll be surprised at how like much progress you can make in 20 hours, but you get comfortable with the idea, with like the process and idea of jumping into something new that you have no idea with, and just like the kind of like the emotional nerves that rack up when you're like, you know, all of a sudden like into something like, I have no idea, what am I doing? Like all you hear is like that, you know, that like guitar player who doesn't know what they're doing, and it just sounds like, oh, this sounds like I should probably just like break this guitar, or I am breaking this guitar. But like those nerves start to just kind of ease away by like the third or fourth thing you dedicate to. And it's funny because if you stop doing that, or, you know, let's say you do that for like, you know, 5 or 6 months, and then you take like a big break, that kind of like nervousness kind of eases back up. So it's something that you kind of just like always work in. But then like just doing that, you either like, you'll learn something that you love to do and you'll take it on past that month. Or you're just like learn a little bit about it. And then now you just become like, back to like that diverse thing again, like you just become, I think, like just more of like an interesting person by just being interested in so many things. And then that gives you touch points as you kind of like dive in a little bit to like connect with somebody you meet in college and like outside of college along the way. So like if you're going from guitar to like learning how to paint, and all of a sudden while you're learning how to paint, you learn about like different types of like painting, like acrylic, oil, and such. All of a sudden, like later down the college, you meet somebody who's a painter, and on top of saying like, oh, that's really cool, that's really beautiful, you get to ask them like a little bit more about like, oh, like, do you like to paint with acrylics or oils? And just have like a better conversation. So I'd say that. So diversify your classes and what you learn, formulate the like kind of clubs and organizations that you do so that you're kind of exposed to different people and like able to, you know, work on different dimensions of yourself, as well as just dedicating like 20 hours to some interest of yours or something that you want to learn roughly every month and going from there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for like sharing your experiences and giving like a tangible like 20 hours, like try it out. I really appreciate your introspectiveness and how you've been able to have those conversations with yourself, and I appreciate you like sharing that with us today as well.
No, happy to do so. And if I was to give one more tangible advice that I got up from a mentor of mine in college, it'd be, funny enough, related to passwords. You're gonna have to make a ton of them, and especially once you get to like the university setting, you're always gonna having to like update them almost like every 90 days, and they're going to require like 13 and a half characters, like the blood of a goat and all that. But I would say make those like some form of like a sentence of like affirmation of like who you are or what you're working on. So I know like even though I was in like engineering school, mine was more geared toward like environmental systems design and mechanical engineering. So I had to take it upon myself to do a lot of like learn as much as I can about like programming or like coding, and I had to do that on my own. But I remember like I think this password's useless anymore, so you can't try to like hack into my or log into anything I have. But it was like I am a developer, and then like some special characters or whatever, or if I'm like whatever thing I'm working on, you know, for whatever the expiration, I think it's like 90 days or something. Like my password were set to like affirming that goal or that idea that I'm working towards. And now every time I have to log in, I'm typing I am so and so, you know. So that's another
I love
tidbit.
that, and I love it because I started doing that a few months ago, but I didn't know.
Yeah.
I don't know why I just did it. So I also went to engineering school, and like
Yeah.
graduating was so hard. Like when I was this close, and so like
Yeah.
my password was, yeah, this is not my password anymore either. But
Yeah.
it was like I am awesome, or like I will graduate 20,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Password guys, but still. But so now when I make new passwords, instead of like a dog's name or something, it's like I'm a badass
Yeah.
or
Just make it connect to one of your goals or what you're working on, and then now that's something that's like
and you wake up every morning, get to your laptop, it's like the first thing you type, you know?
yeah. It's like, you know, it's like a little way of like in a non-weird way of looking yourself in the mirror and be like, you are this,
Yeah.
you know, and it's like,
Unlock.
and you're like, yeah, you look at yourself like, all right, yeah, and then it just kind of like helps kind of like rewire their brain a little bit and kind of keep pursuing that goal.
That's a great point. Thank you.